Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Content Crowd. The Content Crowd is a podcast where we talk about what makes content resonate, from creative habits to point of view shifts to behind the scenes breakdowns, so that listeners and me also can stop mimicking and start making something that matters. I want to start off by mentioning that this podcast is sponsored by Scrappy ABM. Scrappy ABM helps you build repeatable account based marketing plays and teaches you how to own them so that you can bring ABM in house when you are ready. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the messy middle. I know that typically the messy middle is more of like a sales conversation or a sales term, but I want to talk about the messy middle when it comes to content creation. So, like those viral videos where somebody is like, I made, X amount of money my first year in business, or I paid off my house by writing on LinkedIn, or I hit 100,000 followers in 3 months. Like those are cool, but that's sort of the end. And that's not what people need to see right away, at least not right now. They don't need to see that. They need to see the part that came before it, the part with the doubts, the stuckness, the cringe content, the two likes or the no likes. That's the messy middle. And the reason it's kind of important to show that is because, first of all, if after the result, like the before and after, the after part of it is extremely important because it gives proof. But if you're only showing that, if you're only showing yourself at the top of a mountain, people are going to assume that you were helicoptered up there, right? But you've got to show the climb, you've got to show the middle. And what's kind of meta about this is that this podcast you're listening to right now, it's the messy middle. It is my messy middle. If you join live on Thursdays, then you kind of know that that is something that I'm actively building in front of you guys. I'm using a webcam. I have like kind of a nice mic and a little bit of lighting, but I'm just, I'm in my bedroom in my office interviewing people, and it's very lo-fi, and it's just in the middle of me building something bigger. I don't have it all figured out. There's not like a polished brand strategy and a viral content calendar and like all these other things and huge download numbers, but it's something that I'm showing up and doing every week. This will be the 16th week, I believe, that I've shown up. And you know what? That's 16 podcast episodes that I've been on. Before I was really working hard to try to be on other podcasts and maybe you could land, 3 or 4 a year or something like that. But I'd started a podcast and now I've into the year. I've had 52 conversations and been on 52 podcasts. Like that's pretty cool. So sometimes just building something yourself and showing people, how to do it as you're learning is the content that people actually really want to see. So yeah, this is me in the middle. This is me doing the thing, recording, iterating, testing what sticks. And that's exactly what I want to talk about is like why the messy middle and not the polished after is actually the content that people want to see. So let's start here. Most of us, especially if you're a creator or a founder or a coach or whatever, like we think the valuable content like is what happens after the breakthrough. And it's why a lot of us wait so long to actually, publish and start creating because we haven't got to that point yet. Like let me wait until I figured it out and then I'll teach it and then I'll sell a product around it or then I'll do whatever. And what it does is it keeps you stuck in this like invisible holding pattern, constantly consuming and scrolling and second guessing instead of creating yourself. And never actually sharing what you're going through because it feels like it's not ready yet. But here's the hard truth. If you only share the after, a lot of people are not going to believe you, or it's not as valuable because they didn't see the impact and the struggle and the things that you went through. It's kind of like a weight loss journey. Like it's nice seeing the before and after on the P90X commercials, if is P90X still a thing. But it's nice seeing the before and after on the P90X stuff. But like, there's a reason that following somebody's health journey on Instagram is so much more powerful than the before and after in the P90X commercials. So when somebody shows up online, like, hey, here's how I scale to 10K months or 20K months or whatever, or here's how I grew to 10K followers in 30 days. Like you might save it and you might be kind of like impressed, but like you also maybe don't trust it. There's always like this industry plant kind of thought. It's because there's a lack of relatability there. People don't see how you got there. They didn't witness the stuck phase. They didn't witness the awkward, imperfect phase and the no one watched this. And I still posted and I still kept posting. But that's the part that your audience needs because they're still in it or they're about to get started and that's where they're going to be. The relatability is such an important part of growing an audience and growing a community because they need to see, what it's like to go through that and that you understand the struggles. I think one of the things that's also important to note is that for those of you who are looking at content and looking at other content creators for inspiration, you may be looking at the wrong part of their journey if you're only focusing on the after part, or if somebody doesn't share their middle. So you as a content consumer sees a YouTube channel that's gotten really big, or a LinkedIn influencer or whatever, and you're trying to emulate what they're doing now, but they're in a completely different phase. Like, you're so far behind them. Like, if you're emulating what they're doing at their peak, you're not going to be able to mimic that. If you want to be a YouTuber or a content creator and you're looking at like Mr. Beast videos for inspiration, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to emulate that. You need to go back and look at him when he was filling up his backyard pool with like Orbeez. That's the kind of stuff that on a scale that you can do. So I just want to kind of throw that out there as like a side note for people who are looking at that stage and trying to emulate somebody or trying to figure out how to get there. And like I said, this podcast is my messy middle. It doesn't mean you need to start a podcast to do that. You can start, you can write, you can show, you can explain your thought process when writing, or your thought process when coming up with a new offer, and how many offers didn't work, or how many proposals that you sent out before you finally got a yes on something and figured out what it worked. The biggest thing is showing people how you create a process. I think that's another important thing, is like the proof of like a process and building something that is repeatable and showing that your success is possible and you can recreate that in somebody else. But you have to show your work. It's like doing your homework. You have to show your work. What's really interesting is right before I hopped on to record this, I was just thinking about this episode and I was scrolling through Instagram, and somebody had posted a post about their museum of failures. And it was really interesting read, and especially right before this podcast episode, because part of the messy middle is this museum of failures. They talked about all their failed business ventures and how they found something that stuck and how they overcame that, and the sort of the mindset shifts and the business shifts that they made to do that. And so that's why it matters. The messy middle, all those failures, the struggle builds trust, it builds relatability and tells your audience that you're not above them, you're learning with them, or you have been where they are, and you've showed them along the way how you've learned and how you've overcame that. Like, you're right beside them and you're figuring it out with them together. It gives them something to root for and like something to relate to and something that they can actually, strive to be. And it's not miles ahead of them. It's just a few steps ahead of them. And again, showing your process doesn't make you look less credible either. It eventually, it makes your eventual wins believable, because they saw how hard you work. When you do hit that milestone, whether it's landing your first client or landing your 100th client, or going viral, or launching something, or putting a new offer out there, or hitting, however much money a month you want to make, like, people will remember, oh, I saw them posting when nobody else was watching. I saw them building this when nobody else was actually caring about what they were doing. I saw them change their mind, restart, get back up, do it again. And that's what makes the outcome earned. And that's what makes you worth listening to. If you want to be somebody who is impactful and grows an audience and grows a community, you have to be somebody who is worth listening to. So I want to give you sort of like a practical shift to help you with this. Here's your creative reframe for this. If you're in the middle of a pivot, a burnout, or relaunch, or rebuild, you just want to get started, that's not a content block of being stuck or redoing something or not even starting at all. Like, that is the actual content, not in a forced like way of like breaking down everything, but in an honest grounding, this is what I'm learning as I go kind of way. Because someone is where you were 3 steps ago, and if you can help them take one step further with you by showing them what you did to get 3 steps ahead, then you're doing your job. You're creating content that is valuable and that people actually want to know about and engage with. So you have to think that somebody is a few steps behind you, and by you showing them how you're going to take your next step, it gives them guidance on how they can take their next step. So I hope that I hope this helped shift something for you and made you think that, like, okay, maybe I can actually start creating, or I can start posting this draft, or I can start sharing a little bit more. The goal in each one of these episodes is to encourage somebody to start creating content, or start creating new content, or again, just starting over from scratch or just starting at all is the biggest goal. So if you're kind of one of those people who is waiting to hit a certain milestone or get to a certain point before you start creating content, let this be your sign that you should just create it. You should just go out there and show what you're currently working on and build the plane while you're flying it. That's what the messy middle is, and that's the kind of content that people want to see. And yeah, if this was helpful, if this kind of unlocked anything or gave you any ideas, send this to someone who's in the middle of their thing and or somebody that you want to show what they're currently working on, because maybe they need the reminder too that you don't have to be done to be helpful. You just have to be honest. You just have to be willing to show what you're doing and help somebody else get one step further. That'll be it for this week, guys. Hope you guys enjoy the shorter episode, but I will talk at you next week. Have a great week.